All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of Learning the Tropes. I am your host, Erin, and this week I am joined by an old fan favorite, an old friend, an old virgin, former virgin. It's Clayton Gumbert. Hi, Clayton.
Hi, how are you doing, Erin?
Welcome back.
Yes, it's good to be back.
It's crazy. It's crazy to be talking to you in this way again after like almost a full year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's almost been a year, right?
Yeah. I think it would have been, it was like January last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we took a big holiday break that became, for me, an indefinite break.
But clearly indefinite because now you're back. I mean, for one time only, one night only.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
But back just all the same. And we're thrilled to have you back, or I'm thrilled to have you back. That's been the hardest thing since you left is I'm so used to saying we, and it's just me, the podcast. So I'm always like, oh yeah, we're so excited. And it's like, no, just me. I'm so excited.
Oh. Well, I'm excited for you in spirit. Sometimes I'll just get a tingle out of nowhere and I'll be like, oh, it must be Erin excited about an episode.
And that you would be too.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been this past year?
Good, really busy. I mean, sort of, because you're still, in the orbit. It's not like we don't ever see each other. Although we do see each other way less than we normally did because of the podcast. But good. I mean, busy, doing stuff, living the life in New York City.
So you're here to talk specifically about a movie that you reached out to me to say, I want to come on the show. I want to talk about a movie.
Yes, because this movie I watched late night and really liked it, enjoyed it thoroughly, and went online, of course, to see who's talking about this movie. Is there any chatter about this movie? Because I'm a big lurker, as everybody knows. Like, I don't like to actually interact, but I do love to sort of read what other people are saying about it. And I wasn't satisfied. There was no satisfactory talk about this movie online. Yeah. So I was like, well, who could I talk to? Who would either have watched this movie or definitely watched this movie once I reached out to them? And I thought immediately of you. And so I text you and I say, hey, have you seen Love at First Sight on Netflix? And you said you hadn't. And I said, oh, well, I watched it and I loved it. And I'm thinking I should come on the podcast and talk about it. And you said, let me check the schedule and see if we can fit you in.
Yes.
I was like, fair. That's fair. And but then you were like, no, I haven't seen it. I want to see it. And you had some stuff in the pipeline before this, obviously, that had to get out first. And so now we're doing it. We're talking Love at First Sight on Netflix, starring Haley Lou Richardson. And let me look up the dude's name. What is his name? It is Ben Hardy. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I also think this was a movie that I think was a victim of the double strikes, but particularly the actor strike, because this is a movie that is so up my alley and something that I so would have wanted to see that I'm shocked it never penetrated and got to me. But I think that's probably because none of the actors were able to do any press for it. So it just kind of came and went. And so it's so hard, because it's like an adaptation. It's a rom-com. It's British, all these things that are like checking boxes for me. So it's kind of a bummer in that way. And I noticed too, because after I saw it, I also went to look for like reviews or what the chatter was. And there was like nothing.
I know.
So it's kind of a bummer. Yeah.
Now, did you know about this book previous to this movie? Like when I said, hey, you should watch this, and you saw it was an adaptation. Is this a book you had heard of before, being the expert that you are?
No. So it's a YA book. It's
Okay.
called The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight. No,
Hmm.
and I had it. And I think it came out in like 2012 or something like that. Like it came out a little while ago as well.
Okay. Okay. YA not in either of our purviews, really. We
No.
kind of stay away from the YA stuff.
Yeah, the characters are 20 and 22, the leads, which I have to
Okay.
admit, and this is one of those shocking things about aging. Like the thumbnail for this on Netflix is Haley Lou Richardson dancing with Rob Delaney. And my thought was like, oh, it's her and Rob Delaney. But no, in fact, he plays her father, which I am happy
Yes.
about because
Yes.
that feels more
Oh,
appropriate. But it's just my own thing that like I'm like, oh, the young guy, Rob Delaney. And it's not.
you're really showing your millennial age there. We're thinking Rob Delaney's this like hot new talent.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, he'll play the young guy, the young college student.
Now he
No.
exclusively plays dads who are getting remarried.
What else did he play dad who's getting remarried?
He no, I don't think it's just the remarried thing, but I've seen him in several
Oh,
movies as dads. But that's
yes.
great. I mean, listen, I, I think that's great that you have a guy who I think he's in his like mid 40s, right? Mid to late 40s, possibly,
Yeah.
and playing a dad. Go ahead and play dads. You don't have to be the sexy single guy. You can be the dad. Dads are cool.
Dads are cool. And he gives off such strong dad energy as well. I guess he's
I
the
think
dad in Catastrophe. He's dad in real life.
yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely 77. Yeah, so he's in his mid 40s.
He's 46.
Handsome guy, keeping the hair, be a dad. And that's what I liked. I mean, not to jump ahead, but I do think that the relationship between him and Haley or Hadley in this movie, as she is called and named,
Yeah.
is really sweet. Like you said, it's
Mhm.
a believable father-daughter relationship. Even though I think she's 29 in real life,
Mhm.
and Ben, God, I'm gonna always forget because his name in the movie is
Oliver Jones.
Oliver Jones, but Ben Hardy is I think early 30s maybe.
He's 32.
He's 32. Okay, so do we want to just say quickly what this movie's about?
Clayton, what was this movie about?
Oh gosh. Okay, so this movie was about Hadley and Oliver who meet at an airport. They're both headed to England for different occasions. There's a miscommunication. She thinks he's going for a wedding, and because he's got a suit, she's going for a wedding, which is her father getting remarried. Once they depart from the plane after a bunch of cute scenes, they miscommunication, her phone breaks, so she can't get his number. And she's thinking, I got to meet this guy. So shouldn't she figures out where he is, goes to where he is, and figures out that he is not going to a wedding, but he's going to a funeral, but it's not really a funeral. And then they have a fight, split up, and then they get back together. And they get married, and she dies first.
I know. I thought we were going to save that
That
to the end. That
I
is such an upsetting note to leave this movie on.
yeah.
I am baffled as to the choice because
And
up to then it's very sweet.
it is, and it's statistically not the norm with a
Right.
movie so focused on statistics. It's statistically the man dies first. And so at the end they just go through like how many kisses they have or whatever, and then or something like that, and then how he held her hand for her last breath or something like that. And I was like, what? I was so
No,
sad.
because his mother is dying of cancer and it's like uh Hadley held Oliver's hand as he watched his mother take her last breath, which I'm like, okay, upsetting, but also parents are supposed to die first. Like this is the nature of
Yes.
things. And then um it's like, and then he held Hadley's as she took hers. And I was like, huh?
I know.
And that's all I could think of.
Terrible.
And then all I'm calculating is like, okay, well, she's 20. They were married for 58 years. You figure that they didn't get married that year. If they
No.
waited like to graduate college to get married, like she would be in her mid 80s at that stage, which is like, okay,
Yeah.
fine. It's not like she's struck down, in her 30s or something. But it's still such a dour thing. It's like, and if you think about the rules of romance, obviously all these romance people die eventually, but it's like, I never ever want to hear about it. I don't want to know who
No.
goes first. It's such an upsetting to think about.
I guess it's a happily ever after. It is because they were together
Yeah.
for the rest of their lives. But it's like, then what did he do? Was he like an 82-year-old guy who was at one of those old folks facilities and spreading like STDs? Like, did he then be like, now it's my time to really get freaky?
Yeah, I got married so young.
Yeah, I got married so young.
It's so insane.
Like he died of like syphilis when he was like 90. I mean, possibly we don't know. They should have died together. They should have died together.
Yes.
They should have been holding each other's hands as they both took their last breath. And then we'd be like, wait, what happened? But also, good for them.
Right. As the plane careened towards the ground, they held each other's hands.
Yeah, if they died in a plane crash,
That's full circle.
when they're 87,
yeah,
then that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Right. Potentially other innocent lives are lost, which is upsetting. And not to say their lives aren't innocent, but at least it's like, literally a full circle moment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because we're not thinking about who else. Maybe he became a pilot and they were flying, they were flying over, a body of water.
Yes.
There's no whales or dolphins in sight. And something happens. They run out of gas. They hold hands. They say, well, if this is going to be it, this is it. I love you. I love you. Boom, hit the water. That's it. And then they feel no pain. They feel no pain.
No. It all happened so quickly.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. I'm happy. We should do this for all, like anytime we ever speak again about a rom-com. How do they go?
How do they go? I know. Did like Sleepless in Seattle be like, if we found out that like Tom Hanks or Meg Ryan's character like died in his arms or something, like that's terrible.
That would also be the second wife he loses.
That's true.
He has to die first. We can't have that character going through this shit again.
Yeah, Hanks dies first. Yeah.
I'm happy we got that out of the way early. But okay, top line thoughts about the movie. Sort of like what connected you to it. When you saw it.
Well, I really like her. I've seen her in several things. Like I remember she was in Edge of 17 as the friend in that movie, and she's like a very small part. And then she was in a movie called Columbus with John Cho that I really, really loved. It had like a really beautiful soundtrack and really gorgeously shot. The same people who did that movie also did a movie last year called After Yang, which she was also in. And I've always and then she was in a movie that is definitely a movie that I think is slept on, especially because when it came out and what it's called. Do you remember she was in a movie called 5 Feet Apart?
Oh.
She was in a romantic.
I never saw it.
A romantic drama with the kid from one of the twins from the Archie show. What's his face? Yeah, one of the Sprouses. In 2019, this movie comes out, and then it's called 5 Feet Apart, and then, of course, 2020, we all know 6 Feet Apart became the thing. And so I do think it was kind of slept on, but I thought she was really great in that. I, there's something about her that she's just very emotive, but in a natural way. She's just,
Mhm.
I think, very naturally likable, and you root for her. And she's sort of like, and I know a lot of people are. I'm a huge fan of Kristen Stewart, and when I see Kristen Stewart in movies, I think she just does such a great job of doing so very little, but also conveying so much. And I think Haley Lu is like the same. And
Mm.
so when I saw she was in this, so I was like, I gotta watch this. And I think a lot of people know her from White Lotus, right? That's
I
probably where
loved her in
you've
White
seen. Yeah,
Lotus. Yeah.
that's not really indicative of the characters she usually plays. But I do
Mhm.
think she was great in it. I mean, that whole cast was awesome. I mean, there's,
Yeah.
Mike White does not do bad when it comes to
Miss.
casting.
Yeah.
He only does great. So I do think that that really raised the people's knowledge of her. And that's why when this movie came and went, like you said, I think it is because she couldn't go out and she couldn't be on the talk shows and she couldn't
Mhm.
charm people the way she's capable of charming people. So that's what drew me to it. Then I also saw the co-lead was the guy who was in a movie called The Voyeurs. Did you watch that movie on Amazon? It's an erotic thriller
No.
starring Sydney Sweeney and him, and
There's
it
not
is
enough erotic thrillers anymore. Bring 'em back from the '90s.
The Voyeurs is such a awesome, crazy movie that
Mhm.
I would recommend people watch just for like the twists of it. But he's in that movie and he plays a photographer that Sydney Sweeney and her boyfriend start watching through their window him doing like photo shoots and hooking up with the women, and
Mhm.
it's just like kind of spirals from there. It's completely wacky. It's available on Amazon. I would say watch it. But he's a completely different character in this movie.
Yeah. It
And
seems
I
like
think
it.
he's extremely charming in this film. And he pulls off a character that I usually hate. So, like, listeners who have listened to episodes when I used to be on the show know that there's a certain specific type of character that I do not like in fiction, which is the awkward, fumbly, bumbly guy, who I'm always saying the wrong things and blah, blah, blah. This character is pretty like focused on statistics and focused on probabilities and things. But the way he does it and the way it's done in this film, I think is pulled off because he doesn't
Mhm.
come off as obsessive in a way that that's his one character trait. It's just a part of him and a part of how he thinks about things. I mean, I find it to be like, how um like I have Tourette's. That's something that
Mhm.
people who've listened to this podcast know. And that's not my defining quality, but it also is like a part of what makes me think the way I do and sort of act the way I do. But you wouldn't be like, that's his one thing. He's that. And I think
Mhm.
that was what was appealing to me about this character specifically is that he could still be charming, but also have this like quirk that you're not like, why would she be into this guy? I mean, we know why she's into this guy. He's a handsome guy.
Yeah. But I will say, even more than him just being a handsome guy, which he is, they also have chemistry. And I think
Yeah.
that is the thing that is lacking in kind of this rom-com, these rom-coms that seem to be becoming popular again. There's not this focus put on like, do these people have chemistry? To the point when I watched this with producer Pat earlier or a few days ago, at the end when they kiss for the first time, he's like, "Did they really hook up in real life?" And that's a question you should be asking as you're watching
Yes.
a rom-com. And I don't care, like, I don't if they did or they didn't, like, who knows? But it's like, I want to watch two people fall in love that I think, like, actually want to fuck each other. And I think
Yes.
that that is something that is not like, I don't know if people aren't doing chemistry tests anymore. I don't know what is happening, but people need to really get their asses in gear like
Yes.
they did when they casted this movie and they did this
Hmm.
correctly, where it's these two people just have chemistry. You want to see them together. And, anytime that they're apart, you're like, well, why aren't they together? is all you're
Yes.
thinking about. And I'm thinking specifically about a rom-com that's getting a lot of ad space, and I feel like is, being shown, and the leads have zero chemistry. And they are two very attractive people, and that doesn't matter. I don't believe they want to be together.
I think I know where you're going here. Are we talking about Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney?
We are. And two people who I like a lot individually, two actors I like a lot individually. But like, I'm sorry, I don't believe that they want anything to do with each other in that movie.
It's funny because the big rumors were that they were hanging out with each other and cheating on their respective, significant others.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. And then this is before I saw the teaser or this full trailer that just dropped. And I was like, I could see that. I mean, look, it's him and her. I mean, those
Mhm.
two, if they don't want to have sex with each other, then what's wrong, right?
Mhm.
But watching that trailer, okay, that trailer is
God.
terrible. The
Yes.
trailer looks like a Netflix movie. And in the that's in the pejorative way, in one of those
Right.
cheapo, sort of bland, um,
Mhm.
rip off, knockoff Netflix romance rom-coms they try to shove down our throat, which is what Love at First Sight is not. Now listen, Love
No,
at
no,
First
no.
Sight is by no means moonstruck. I'm not saying this is like a new classic or anything like that. But quality-wise, it just has something that the other ones don't have. And it's
Mhm.
soulful performances by everybody in it, right?
Yes.
This Glenn Powell Sydney Sweeney movie looks like it's going to be focusing on pratfalls and them hating each other and being their most unlikable selves, which, enemies to lovers is one of those things that's really hard to do because they're mean to each other and
Mhm.
they're jerks. So it's like very difficult to like root for them. And that's really hard to pull off because I do think Glenn Powell is charming, but he also can play an asshole.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think from what I'm seeing in the trailer, he's bordering too much on asshole.
Yes.
And
And
so who
yeah.
knows? I mean, listen, maybe we'll have to get on Mike for this one. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want
Oh,
to
yeah.
say
I
anything. I
will
don't want
be
to.
seeing it in theaters, obviously. So am I
Yeah.
part of the problem? Yes. I do think we should talk about it afterwards. But also, I think it has the two tropes that I think are the most overused and the dullest, which are fake dating and enemies to lovers, which is
Yeah.
like, obviously, anything can be pulled off correctly and I'll love it. But
Hmm.
it's just if you don't understand the trope, just being like these people hate each other and then they look at each other one day and then they love each other and it's like
Yeah.
that ain't fucking it. And I'm
Hmm.
tired of it, especially in contemporaries. It's awful.
Yeah.
Um anyway, that's not this movie. I will say this movie is shot really beautifully. The style of it is gorgeous because it's just a little bit of like an elevated, like a heightened reality. Like everything is just like a little
Hmm.
bit sillier, but not in a way that feels like cheap or not grounded. Like it still feels grounded. It just feels in a place where you're like, oh, I want to go in and live in this movie where
Yes.
kind of everybody is nice, everything is gorgeous to look at. Like the
Hmm.
wedding scene, I mean, all the actors are gorgeous. Like all of the costuming feels grounded and real, but also just like that little bit heightened. It's directed by Vanessa Coswell, just to shout
Oh,
her out.
what else has she done? I feel like she did something else that people liked. Let me
I'm
see.
sure.
But the other thing is, so I thought it was stylized, but not in a way
Mhm.
that, oh, she did. Oh, okay, no, that's not the what I thought it was. Um, oh, looks like she did the Little Women miniseries. What is? I thought for there is a um 13, a TV miniseries, not the movie 13. Which have you ever heard of that movie?
Oh yeah, of course. But no, she didn't
Yeah,
make
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was
That
like,
was a
"That's
while
not
ago.
her." Yeah, yeah, that was like Catherine Hardwicke
No,
or something,
this
right?
13, have you watched this show 13?
No, I don't watch a lot of TV.
It is phenomenal, and it's basically about this
Really?
girl who is kidnapped at 13, and then 13 years later, she turns back up to
Oh,
her
wow.
family and has been, like, kept hostage, obviously, for 13 years, and it's about her kind of integrating back into life because obviously, like, things have changed in that amount of time, but then
Yeah.
also there's some questions about, like, was she where she said she was, and it's all a bit mysterious. So it's really good.
Wow.
If you
Okay.
do if you do wanna touch down on more from Vanessa Coswell. But yeah,
Obviously,
I
skilled director, as you said,
yes.
very skilled.
And this was written by Katie Lovejoy, who also wrote All To All the Boys I Loved Before. So
Okay.
a rom-com queen, must we say? I mean, I think that these are 2 really well done um s- scripts, and I have to say I'm only going after the script because I have not read the book and I don't really know
Yeah.
anything about it. But I will say the framing of this movie with having Jamila Jamil play basically fate or
Uh
like a
huh.
narrator. She shows up constantly, but every time you see her, you are like happy to see her in a different costume. She plays like a million different like people
Yeah.
that the main characters are interacting with. And
She helps them get together.
yeah, and I thought that the script was fantastic. I really loved it, and also, can we say the best part of this movie? 91 minutes.
Yes. When you asked originally what drew me to this film, I would
Mhm.
say number one, Haley Lou Richardson.
Yeah.
Number two, the runtime, because this was so short and sweet. It left
Mhm.
me wanting more
Mhm.
in a way where I was like, I want to be left wanting more. So I don't want more. Like when I say I want to be left wanting more, that doesn't mean I want more. And I was upset that there wasn't more. I want to feel that way. I want to
Mhm.
feel like I enjoyed this and there's just a little bit, like maybe I could have one more cookie, but I'm not going to because this one cookie is just enough. And I think the twist in this movie really did get me. Even though I don't I mean, they could have been maybe choreographed for other people. I tend to be able to shut my mind off when it comes to like, you know, the fact that he wasn't really going to a wedding, because you could kind of tell that he wasn't in that mood for it.
Mhm.
But then when it turns out that it's like a living wake, I was shocked and
Yeah.
happy, but then also sad because he's sad and he kind of thinks it's a little bit like weird and he's having a hard time with it. And that he had to, and it wasn't a suit, it was dress up because they're theater people and he had to dress like some
Like
Shakespeare
Macbeth?
character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some Shakespeare character, Macbeth, the most famous one. Um, but what really I loved about this movie was the beginning. I think the strongest part of it is them meeting and being on this plane.
The how strong the first act is, and it's not to say that the second and third act aren't strong because I think like it's very a consistent movie for sure, but how strong the act is and how much you believe that these people who have just met are in love with each other and need to be together
Yes.
is phenomenal. And that is, yeah, the actors are both so charming, the script is so charming, the directing is so charming. You just feel it so strongly. And yeah, like
Mhm.
you said, just being with the two of them as they're falling in love is so much like kick your heels giddy fun that
Yeah.
you could let it last forever. But like you said, you need to be it's like after you have a wonderful meal and you're like, "I'm satisfied," but then if you have, like, another 2 bites, you're like, "Now I feel gross and bloated."
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
this movie leaves you like, "Oh my god, that was an incredible meal, and I'm so satisfied, and if I have 2
Mhm.
more bites, it's all over." So that's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah.
pacing of it is so good and moves so quickly. Because yeah, Oliver
Yeah.
ends up at his mother's living memorial, which I was obviously sad, did cry, but I loved it as a concept. I think it's such a
Yeah,
beautiful thing. Yeah.
yeah. I loved the mom and the dad's relationship too, because you could tell
Oh, yeah.
like he was really sad. I mean, they were, you know, obviously the fact that they would organize this and do this, and they met on, doing these sort of plays and stuff, and that he was doing this for his wife and his partner, and like trying to put on a brave face, there was just so much going on there without it having to be really stated as much. I mean, they do state the
Mhm.
situation and obviously, but it's like the thing about these roles is that they just felt lived in. Like they didn't feel like even his brother, who's this wants to
Yeah.
be a DJ, which is such a British, like it's such a British rom com side character to have, right? With like the
Yeah.
raver person or whatever. Even he was like a little bit more real of a person than most of these movies make them.
Right. And where you can see the way that children always try to rebel from their parents,
Mhm.
the way that Oliver goes so hard into math and statistics, which is probably something that feels very foreign to his parents. And then the
Yeah.
way that his brother Luther tries to be, is so much sillier, but wants to be this kind of outlandish DJ, which is like pretty far from a Shakespearean actor. I think
Mhm.
it's believable also that these two parents would create these two children, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
said, that's what makes it feels lived in. The mother, is played by Sally Phillips, who, um, I know her from Bridget Jones's Diary, and I always love her
Yes.
whenever she shows up, she's so good, and the father is Dexter Fletcher. But I yeah, it was such a beautiful thing, and it like you said, it was so unexpected to have him be going to basically like a living wake or a living memorial that,
Mhm.
yeah, I thought it was so gorgeous, and I think people should start doing that too. Because why wait for
Yeah.
somebody to be dead to say nice things about them?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. And when they meet up, when she shows up, she leaves her father's wedding, comes to this, and shows up. I was like, and it was like what 40 minutes in the movie, so I knew it wasn't going to be over. But I was like, that's it. They're together. This is going to be amazing. This is perfect. And of course, as we know, there had to be complications where it
Mhm.
was basically the complication of you don't know me. Like
Yeah.
we had a romance, like we definitely fell into love, obviously. But if you're coming here and you're telling, you're trying to help me with this situation with my mom, like it's so complicated. It's very hard for me to open up to you because you're basically a stranger. I was like, part of me was like, who cares? Shut up. That's dumb. But truthfully, like truthfully for that character, that makes sense. That it's like
Mhm.
he has this switch in his brain. He was like, I just we don't know each other. Like this is sort of weird, and it is sort of weird. And so I'm of course bummed when she leaves, and then she leaves her bag, so she can't she has to like trade in her shoes for other shoes and all this stuff. But like when her dad shows up and they have their conversation, and like I also really believed Hadley's problem she had with her dad, divorcing her mom and getting remarried, because that is something that is like, I had this comfortable life, and what you and mom were up to was like, I didn't even really think about it. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it's not working, and it's hard not to be angry because that upheaval is huge for a kid. And so, like, everything just felt really real because the woman he's going to marry was not like a horrible person. She was
No.
trying her best, but she also wasn't being like, why don't you like me, why don't you like me? She knew the situation is a hard situation and played it, I think, really well. And so that's what's different from these sort of movies that try to be super over the top with characters, right? Where this woman's a harpy and this guy's a scumbag and this guy's like a total dork. It's like there was nuances to all these characters in a way that you don't see in a lot of these movies.
Mhm. Yeah, everybody felt very three-dimensional, and, everybody was also, like, nice. Everybody was doing their best. There was no
Mhm.
villain, and I think, yeah, it would have been so easy to make Charlotte the woman that, her father is marrying into somebody who is just, like, awful, and she's
Mhm.
not.
No.
And I also liked that they made Hadley, like, kind of a brat. Like, I like
Mhm.
that she is somebody who she's 20, so she's a kid, and she's, like, pretty selfish because it's like, "Really? You leave your father's wedding to
Yeah.
go find a guy?" Like, that's crazy. That's, like, he would have reason to, like, really dress you down because that's an incredibly rude thing to do. And
Yeah.
also that she is flying into the wedding day of, where
Mhm.
he was like, "I didn't think you were gonna be able to make it." And it's like, what did you have going on that your father's wedding, you couldn't come in, like, a day or 2 before? And then
Yes.
she's talking about how she's leaving the next day. I mean, ultimately, she says she's gonna miss the plane, but, um, that she would just be like, "Well, I'm coming in only for the day." Like, to fly to London for
Yes.
the day from New York is kind of crazy, but, um,
Yeah. And it's an
yeah,
obvious message. It's an obvious bratty move. Like you said, that is a
yeah,
bratty ass move to be like, I'll give you one day and I'll show up an
mhm,
hour before and then I'm
mhm.
out of there. And that was even before she runs away to see the guy.
Right, and she shows up and she's like, "Oh, this dress is ugly, this
Yeah.
and that." It's like, "Okay, girl, you weren't here for
Yeah.
it, so what do you want?" And
Mhm.
also, I thought it was cute. I liked the style of the wedding and everything being red. I thought was very sweet. Um, yeah, and I the Rob Delaney's character I thought was really lovely too, and how, like, open and understanding he was with his daughter from the beginning, and how he was kind of
Mhm.
like, it had been over for us for a while, and, you know,
Yeah.
between him and his first wife.
I do
Yeah.
also love that her rebellion was to not read the book he gave her to read, which is something that they used to do together because he's an English teacher, right? Like
Mhm.
not just an English, but he teaches the classics or whatever books, and he would always give her books to read, and she didn't read this one. And that's her like super bratty move is like, my dad gave me a book and I'm not going to read it. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's like,
It's pretty
that
tame.
that's yeah, yeah, that's such a tame thing. But yeah, they are all, the people are all good-hearted in this movie. They just make selfish decisions sometimes, which is
Mhm.
what human beings do. And they can always be people can be confused with being evil when they're being selfish.
Mhm.
It's so easy to be like, this person's a piece of shit. And it's like, well, maybe they're just being selfish. And that's not to say there isn't piece of shit behavior because there absolutely is. But, it's very easy to just be like, that person's awful because they're being selfish. When it's like, you know, I don't think she's an awful person. And I don't think that the dad's an awful person for getting divorced. It's like they're just people trying to figure it out.
No, I don't think that she's a bad person, but I think sometimes it's like, I think sometimes in lesser rom-coms, the idea is like, well, we have this heroine and she has to be perfect, but we'll make her clumsy, and that'll be her problem, that she's
Hmm.
always, like, falling.
Yeah.
And I liked that they were like, "Well, yeah, she's not perfect, she's kind of self-centered and a mess," because it's like, "Girl, you were on a plane for 7 hours and you couldn't charge your phone once?" Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that
Yes.
was gonna be a problem for when you landed. And it also shows kind of why she and Oliver are such a perfect couple, because it's like, yeah, he's gonna ground her, and then she's gonna kind of like loosen him up a little bit. And you can see
Mhm.
where they'll meet in the middle and it'll be a really solid relationship.
Yeah.
Um it made me miss London because it was also shot, like, very beautifully in London. I did like that she got lost and ended up in the most charming, tiniest street fair in the world.
Yeah,
And she was like, "I
absolutely,
couldn't
yeah.
possibly find my way home," and it's like, I'm like, "Girl, none of these people could tell you where Spitalfields is?" Like, I think somebody would.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I bought into it though, because the
Oh,
conceit
yeah.
would have to be that, yeah. That's one of those things, man, and you write scripts and I write scripts, it's like, those fucking phones, you gotta get rid of the
Yeah.
phones, because nothing fun happens when all the characters have their phones,
And when they just text
'cause
each
they'll
other.
yeah, they just text each other or they'll just be on TikTok. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, most
Mhm.
movies, people would just be watching TikToks if they had their phones, like thrillers. It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
matter. You kidnapped, I got my phone. I guess I'll call the cops, but first I gotta check out TikTok for a little bit.
So let's see what's
Calm
trending.
myself down. Yeah, I gotta see what's trending. Is my kidnapping trending?
um, story time. I'm kidnapped. I think,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, obviously she had to not have her cell phone in order for like everything else to work. So like I understand her having her cell phone would be better, but I think it ends up being a character trait, that I think is
Yes.
in that way
Yeah.
it's well integrated into the plot instead of just being like, how are we going to get this girl without her cell phone?
And I think that's
Um,
the strength of her as an actor in that, going back to the White Lotus character she played. I mean, if that's played by anybody else, that's a terrible character that you would not have any sympathy for whatsoever. You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh
And I
yeah.
think I think that's her unique charm is that she could make this character very charming while doing selfish bratty things. That's really hard to pull off.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all in all, like a really fantastic movie. I loved it.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't, if you're listening to this podcast, thank you, number one. And
Hmm.
number two, if you haven't seen this movie, throw it on. It is just really enjoyable. It's, again, like I said, it's not, I wouldn't put it in the all time, rom com tier of like greatness. But for what's coming out now, and just something that you could watch for an hour and a half and really enjoy yourself and laugh and cry and be charmed. We love at first sight. That's the way to do it.
I will say, of the kind of rom-com revival that I hope is happening, this is like a bright spot. Like they
Hmm.
get it. And I feel
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
yeah,
the thing that started it was, all these rom coms on Netflix was the one with Zoe Deutsch in it. What was that one? I
set it
can't
up.
remember. Set It Up, which Glenn Powell. There we go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
They were great in that and they had chemistry in that. Like you believed the two
yes.
of them together. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I like this better than that just because of, the fact that it's in London, the fact that it is an actor that I enjoy more. Although I do like Joey
Mhm.
Deutsch, I do enjoy Haley better just because they do different things. Like it's apples and
Yeah.
oranges sort of thing. Like Zoe Deutsch seems to me like she would be the heir apparent to a like Sandra Bullock in the sense
Mhm.
of, I love Sandra Bullock, but she doesn't play like deep emotions. She's a movie star, like she is movie star, she does movie star stuff. And I think someone like Haley's more of like an actor really playing the realness of it. And so, yeah, but in between all these sort of, these two movies, it's just been so much just like crap, like really bad stuff. And, I think it really does, like everything. It lessens people's appreciation of a genre because when they see so much trash in it, they will not even give a chance to something that could possibly be good.
Right, and I think it's the old thing too of like, well, we know they're gonna end up together in the end or something, like, what's the point? Even though, like, so many genre films, you know what's happening at the end. Like, at the end of a superhero movie, the superhero saves the day. At the end of a mystery, they solve the mystery, But, for some reason, rom-coms are always judged by kind of the worst of them for
Hmm.
being overly cheesy and not for the best, which I think is what is can be a bummer, but is what is exciting about movies like this that I think do elevate it. And I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, it's a bummer that this came out during the strike because I think it could have had a bigger impact than it did, and I hope people will start finding it over time, you know?
Yes. Yes. And
And I
hopefully
think
this episode will be for people who are doing what we did, which was watch this movie and be like, nobody's talking about this. Why isn't anybody talking about this movie? Oh, these two bozos are talking about it. Maybe I'll give them a shot.
there you
Well,
go.
one bozo and
Like our
one
most
bozo
listened
and one
to
expert.
episode, but like our most listened to episode, which what is that movie even called where it's the heart
Last
transplant?
Christmas.
Which I'm convinced the only reason people ever listen to that episode because they're like, did this movie exist? Did other people see it? Or was it a fever dream?
Yes, absolutely. That is wait, they're like Paul Feig directed this? Wait, what is this movie? Yes, I do think they only click on our podcast to be like, "Oh yeah, I didn't Mandela affect this movie into being."
Right. I need to discuss
But
it. I need someone else to have seen this.
but we've mentioned this before that is our biggest downloads for any episode that we've ever
Mhm.
done.
By a
And it
lot.
is by a lot. Like like tens of thousands, basically. It is insane when you look at that number of how many people have listened. And people listen to it around Christmas. I bet you it's got a big bump right now. I bet you
Probably.
it's one of the most downloaded episodes of this month and next month. It'll be
Mhm.
like an insane bump. And it's the last Christmas episode. There's people watching that movie every year just looking for stuff to watch. So it's got Christmas in the title, so that's good.
Yeah, just looking for someone for that to have been real for somebody
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
So insane. Um, yeah, but this one, yes. Everybody watch Love at First Sight. Everybody interact with rom-coms and kind of the movies that you want to see. Get the algorithm
Mhm.
up. And hopefully after the strike, everybody who worked on this will get some sort of a bump from people watching it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
It has to reach a certain threshold for people to start getting paid on the back end, but let's make that happen.
Yeah, let's get them their back end. Let's get them their cash. Um, Amazing. Any last thoughts about Love at First Sight?
No, I just really liked it. I mean, it made
Yeah.
it got me so excited that I was like, I got to talk about it. So that rarely happens when it comes to
Mhm.
those types of movies.
It's also that movie that I always am looking for whenever, like, Pat's gone and I'm home alone and I'm, like, ordering dinner and I'm like, "I just wanna watch this movie," basically. You
Yes. I
know?
mean, that's the demo that this movie should aim for is people whose partner is out. They want, they ordered food, like you said, which is the best. You're just ordering for
Yeah.
one. So it's like, I can eat whatever I want to eat. And then you just want an hour and a half to zone out, eat your hamburger, your burrito, your pad thai, whatever it is, and just enjoy yourself. Be under a blanket,
Yeah.
got to be under a
Cozy,
blanket for this movie.
light some
Yeah.
candles, around
Set
the
the
room to
candle.
create the perfect glow.
Yeah. There you go. That's what this movie's perfect for.
Yes. And we need more. We need more for the demographic. Criminally underlooked.
Mhm. 'Cause it's there.
Yeah, it's there. Clayton, what has you swooning this week? Or this
Oh,
year? I guess since we haven't
this
talked in so
year,
long, it could be from
this past year.
anything.
So you know what? This is something that I was actually there's a show that's being rebroadcast on Paramount Plus called Calling from Accounts. Have you heard of this show?
No. And
It
famously,
is
you don't
sort
watch
of
television.
I don't, but so it's sort of a rom-com premise.
Oh.
And it's an Australian show, originally done in Australia, and being rebroadcast for us Americans. And it's about this guy who is driving his car and this younger woman who is walking across the street, and he like stops, he like almost hits her, and there's like this like misunderstanding, whatever. And she walks across when he stopped, and for whatever reason, she like flashes him, and he gets so sort of confused that he hits this dog.
Oh,
And
no.
so he's like, "Oh my god, I hit a dog." And so they kind of are brought together by this dog being hit. And so they take it to the vet, and it's going to cost like $12,000 to like keep this dog alive. And it just sets up this like interaction between these two characters and like how they bump off each other. And it's fun. I mean, I liked it. I'm not a big TV person, as you said, but I watched it. I watched like the first two episodes and got really into it. And there's sort of like it's a little bit of like that cringe humor, cringy humor, but also there are dramatic parts to it. So I enjoyed it, and the dog is really cute. It's on wheels, so it has to like
Oh, wow.
its back legs are on wheels. So they don't really like overuse the dog, but once in a while they'll like show the dog, and you'll just be like, oh, that's such a it's so cute, and you can see why they want to like take care of this dog, and it's sort of bringing them together. But it's a rom-com-y premise, so I would say maybe check it out.
Definitely. That sounds great. Yeah, I haven't heard of it. I need to check it out.
And there's 4 episodes available now, and I think there's 8 episodes in total, and they're dropping them 2 at a time. So by this Thursday, 6 episodes should be out, and then well, I guess no, we don't know when this is running. Maybe they're all there when you're listening to this. And if you're in Australia or the UK, you've already seen this. This is old news for you.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Aaron, what has you swooning?
Thanks for asking. I read a book that was a non-romance, so it was a departure for me, and it's called Bright Young Women. It's by Jessica Knoll, and it's a fictionalized retelling of the Chi Omega sorority, where famously Ted Bundy murdered 2 women and assaulted 2 others. And it's told entirely and exclusively from the point of view of the women who survived. And I thought it was an absolutely gorgeous reframing of that, the typical true crime genre, which I think would focus on the murderer, and he's never mentioned by name in the book ever. He's irrelevant in a way that I think is really important. And it shows kind of what the fallout can be from this kind of things, and what the tragedy really is, and that a lot of victims, and especially victims of serial killers, tend to be reduced to just kind of like a name and one photo, and you don't really think about like who they were and what their lives were up until that moment. And I thought it was just a gorgeous book, and I thought it was something very important for anybody who has ever kind of interacted with the true crime genre to read, because to kind of have that reframing. And I'll say it's not a particularly like gruesome book. Obviously, the crimes are explained, but it's not dwelled upon at all. So I'd say even if you're like a little bit queasy about stuff like that, I would still say it's 100% worth reading. And it's just a really powerful novel. And yeah, and I really enjoyed it. So if you are at all interested, yeah, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yeah. How do we end this? It's so strange because I feel like normally we end it
Or
together.
we just talk about, we just well, can I do some plugs?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course. Plug some stuff, Clayton. How can people
No, it's
find
okay.
you?
Well, I'm not on social media in any way,
Famously.
other than through the BO Boys, which
Mhm.
we have a lot of social media run by our intern, wanna BO senior intern, Christopher, because we do have a junior intern,
Mhm.
Jack, who does research for
Yeah.
us. And so BO Boys twice a week. We're on YouTube, lots of extra web exclusive stuff over there. As you know, Aaron, we do so much BO Boys. It is taken over
It's
our lives
it's
in
most
a
of
good
my life.
way.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, you have been sucked into the orbit. At
Mhm.
some point, it will be a 5-day a week venture. It's happening. It's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, BO Boys, you can hear me on that. I also edit and help produce now a podcast called Taste,
Mhm.
which is a great podcast that comes out 3 times a week. It is about food, something that I didn't know that much about until I started editing this podcast, and now I am so much more uh I'm so much more informed about the just world of food, cooking, groceries, all that stuff. great hosts over there, Matt and Eliza, are doing really awesome stuff. And then I guess I'll just plug the first season of Criminal Types, which is also
Oh,
a
yeah.
podcast that I edit, and it's a
Mhm.
really awesome podcast if you're into true crime. And it's really good, and it should be coming back for a second season at some point, hopefully, because people really, really liked it.
Well, Criminal Types, it's about like mystery novels, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it wouldn't be
yeah.
true. Is it true?
It
Does she do
wouldn't be
true crime or no? It's
no, it's
fiction.
it's
Okay.
fiction, it's novels and stuff, but like I do think people do crime fans. Um, I know the host herself, she's a
Mhm.
fan of all that stuff. So I do think if you like true crime and crime novels, you will like Criminal Types.
Yes. Wow. You have been busy.
I know, I'm so busy. But not too busy to go to Thanksgiving at your parents' house, which is what's happening coming up this week.
Tomorrow. As we
Yeah.
record this, it's happening tomorrow. I think this episode will probably go out December 20th or something, in which case we will be about to be joined for Christmas.
Yes, we'll be together for Christmas. So yeah.
Yeah, obviously, we're family. It's great. In the ranking of my parents' love for their children, it goes my brother, Clayton, Pat, me. We've established.
Wow. Pat has moved up the ranks?
I'm always last. No, Pat was
Okay.
always ahead of me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I would reshuffle that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah.
My parents wouldn't. But I think and this is something we've said to my parents, and they haven't disagreed. They've just laughed and looked the other way.
Yeah. I know it's one of those things where you're totally fishing for like, can you re-rank this? And they're just like,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
That's
There's no
funny.
point in fishing with my parents. It's an empty pond. It's nothing's
Yeah.
there.
With
Yeah.
with that, I'm so excited to see them. I have snacks for them, which you helped me pick out, which is good.
Yes. Oh, they're gonna love that. They're gonna love the snacks. They love seeing you. I loved having you back on the podcast. Obviously, like I
Yes,
said,
so
the door is
fun.
always open to you. If you ever want to come back, if you want to come back to talk about that, ever that Sydney Sweeney, Glenn Powell monstrosity ends up being, anything
Yeah,
else, obviously we're always here for you. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, to our listeners, you could always email us at learningthetropes@gmail.com. You can join our Patreon where there'll be a video of this up. If you want to watch us talk, you can do it there. Our socials, we are on Instagram at learningthetropes. And yeah, and until next time, happy watching and reading.
Happy watching and reading.
All right, bye guys.